Today, we're going to answer a question that's been at the back of my mind now for literally years, one that I'm kind of weirdly excited to answer. What happens if you get a little tiny stone in your bag of coffee beans and that somehow makes its way into the grinder? How bad is that? Now, many of you watching this will think, why would you worry about this? I've never had a stone in my beans, and most people never will. Now and again people do. They often post to the internet about it, so it's kind of top of mind for a lot of people, even if it's not something they've experienced. I want to test this, and I can test this, and so let me talk you through what we're going to do today. In a second, I'll walk you through how stones might end up or not end up in your bag of coffee beans, and then we'll get into the meat of the testing. I have a grinder here. We're going to grind some stones with it. It's not all stones actually, there's some foreign matter, just to spice things up a little bit. We've measured them all, we'll show them to you, and then we'll put them into a dose of coffee beans and we'll grind them. And what we've got is a set of burrs in here that we've already measured. We've photographed them, we know what they look like. We've got a grind control sample from them. So we can see if a stone damages your burrs, can you see a change in the particle size distribution? Now I could be wrong here, but I'm going to say I don't think you're going to see a change. As I look at a set of typical burrs, there's already quite a lot of damage in there where we've cut 3 holes for circles to put screws in. I think about that, what that's done to the cutting teeth compared to what a small piece of stone might do to it when you grind it. But now, to me, somewhere else, to tell you about the whole deal of how stones get in or get out of a bag of coffee. Hi there, we're here inside a roastery. I'll show you this. It's a small destoner. It looks quite big, but it's actually quite small. This is for smaller batches of coffee. And the way that most destoners work, in fact all sort of traditional destoners work, is that you load the coffee in the front, and you've got a great big fan sucking up air, and it sucks the coffee up this tube. So far so easy. The secret is you set it just right so that the suction is right, that it can pick up coffee beans, which are not very dense, they're quite light, and can't pick up foreign objects like stones or bits of wood or bits of metal. Those stay stuck at the trap, you empty that out, and you've got any foreign material that may have been in the coffee. A practical demonstration. So this is used on a 15 kilo capacity roaster, and for a bigger roaster you just have a bigger setup, but the system is basically the same. But how do stones end up in sacks of raw coffee? Well, it's pretty unlikely, and it's actually pretty difficult to give you one single solitary answer to that question. Coffee is grown outside, it's processed, it's often dried outside. There are just opportunities when you sort of working with large volumes of coffee to have the odd bit of patio stone almost, or just stone from outside, work its way into a batch and sneak all the way through into a finished sack. As I said, it's pretty unlikely. The types of stones that you get can kind of be divided into 2. There's the ones that look like little bits of patio that look like they're almost made of cement or concrete. And then there are sort of just regular pebbles, stones that you might see sometimes. Occasionally you do get other stuff, but it's pretty rare, like the odd bit of metal or the odd bit of wood. These are all picked up by destoners. The tricky bit can be that smaller roasters tend not to have destoners, and they're more reliant on catching them sort of in the cooling tray and having a look there. Most roasters will obviously pay attention to the coffee as it's cooling. Bigger roasters tend to all have destoners attached to them as part of the sort of process, and that's what's typically removing most of them. Once in a blue moon though, I guess one can sneak through, which is why we're making this whole video. All right, let's set the parameters and why we've chosen what we've chosen. The grinder, the DF64 Gen 1. It's got a pretty chunky motor in here. It runs a reasonable wattage at a high RPM, should have a bit of torque, should stand a pretty good chance of actually getting through some stones potentially, and certainly impacting with enough force on a sort of hard to break stone that we should see some damage on the burrs, potentially. As for the burrs themselves, bit of a controversial choice. We bought these just out of curiosity. They are the kind of AliExpress knockoffs of the SSP burrs. I'll say right now, on 2 levels, I don't recommend buying them. 1, we're just not really a fan of knockoffs here. We don't think that's good. I get cheap is good, but at the expense of someone else's business seems bad. And 2, they don't do the greatest of jobs, to be honest. So on those 2 fronts, really don't get those. But pretty good for us to smash some stones with, I think, or I hope. The first thing we're going to grind is not a stone. Is this little guy. It's a little tiny piece of wood. You know, start easy, start gentle, see what happens. We'll let the grinder have a hot start. We'll throw this in the beans. Give it a little spray. We don't want static. Imagine if this breaks the grinder immediately. Wouldn't that be good? Bit noisy. Look at that. That's made pretty short work of a bit of wood. That's, not surprising to me that burrs running at this speed would smash the wood to pieces. We'll give it a clean out, have a quick inspection of the burrs, and proceed. Now it's time to escalate things a little bit. I have here a stone, kind of a stone. These little tiny bits of stone are probably the most common thing I see when people post about finding stones online. These are most likely to come from a drying patio, potentially. So they're almost like bits of grout sometimes. They look kind of sandy in appearance. So I think this should just pass through. But will it? Let's find out. Like a hot knife through butter. Nothing at all. Breezy. Little noise on the slowdown. Sounds like something might be stuck on the sweepers. Shall we have a look? I'm not going to say I'm disappointed, but everything seems fine. There's no visual damage at this point. Let's escalate things with a bigger stone. Reset, same touch point, same 0. Try and keep those particle sizes pretty similar. Now for the same thing, but bigger. This size, again, you see quite a lot on the internet. You may be wondering, what if I drink the stone? Look, I'm pretty confident that it's not soluble, so you're probably fine. I don't think you'd taste it in there. I don't know how you do that test. We could probably do that test at some point. Maybe we should do that test at the end. Anyway, we should hear this one, because I didn't hear a thing last time. I feel reasonably confident saying that if you get a stone like that, or if you hear a stone like that, nothing bad's happened, because we couldn't see a thing on those burrs. I think it's time to escalate it further again. This is where I kind of hope there's a geologist in the comments who can tell me the kind of rock that we're looking at here. But this is a stone, like a stone. It's like a little stone, but it's a stone. This one I expect to hear. This one I suspect might jam the grinder. So I'll keep my finger ready by the off button. Now I'm nervous because I've got to step back from the I didn't even hear that one. I don't see a stone. Did we grind a stone? Like a real stone? Okay, let's escalate it further. We're slightly disturbed by how easy it was to break the last stone. So I'm just trying to see if through my sheer force of power, I can't break the stone. Okay, so that's a pretty stony stone. This one's bigger again. I suddenly have a lot more faith that this grinder will smash it up. This thing running at 1400 RPM for us is really useful because if it does jam, it'll be spinning so hard when it jams that we should really see some good solid burr damage. And that's what I want to test. I want to see at what point damaged burrs start to produce a different grind profile. All right. Oh, wouldn't be the first time. Why am I disappointed? This is such a weird emotion. Ooh. Well, we've got to see what that is. Oh, I see. He hasn't gone through. Coward. Now, we've set this relatively fine, but it has proven resistant to grinding by being too large of a piece. Choices. We could try again, or we could go slightly coarser. So we're going coarser, up to a kind of filter setting on here. We're grinding at 25 on this thing, if you know this grinder, with 0 being the touch point. And so 70 a bit coarser, maybe we can get that stone a bit deeper in the burrs. Oh, look at this! Yeah, the stone ate it. Look at that stone. Whoa. Not gonna lie, that was surprisingly exciting. Let's have a look inside. I'd be so disappointed if it looks the same. Ooh! Dusty burrs. There's like a little bit, I think, of damage here on this sort of big cutting tooth. That isn't going to be a part that does a lot of final cutting in a burr set. Remember, it's the edges here that really determine your kind of finished particle size. The bigger teeth towards the outside really are kind of pre-breaking teeth. So if they are imperfect, I can't imagine that ruins the day. We'll find out. And again, looking in here, you can see like a little bit of damage, but not very much. So we'll escalate things further, see if we can cause some real damage. Our final competitor, it's a good little pebble. Again, geologists in the chat, come on, what is this? What is this? For grinding, we're going to go back to our coarse setting again in the hope of sucking this thing in. Of course, we've grabbed a sample at the finer setting to see if the damage is visible yet. I'd be very surprised if it was. Very exciting. Well, it's just breezed through that. That's like, again, geologists, what kind of a layer is this? What kind of a layer in the bed of the Earth have we discovered here? Could we mine this? We'll get it in the particle size analyzer. We'll see what we got. Now, like any normal person, I've got my video microscope here to have a little bit of a closer look. I'm not seeing a lot of damage. It looks like just a really intense coating of tiny pieces of stone. I will try and scrape some off to see what happens. Not much damage anywhere. If we move over to the blades, they're all looking... Oh, there's a bit of damage there. I mean, that's a clear bit of damage, but can you taste it? We can do better than that. It's time to escalate one more time. Now is health and safety time. Right, our last contender is something that's very unlikely to end up in a bag of coffee beans. Bits of metal. They're very heavy, so that if you have a destoner, they don't make it through. But let's imagine that it did make it through. Hey, buddy. Now, I did hear one good solid impact, but let's see if any visible damage to you. Oh, it might have just been bent out of shape slightly. We'll try again, and we'll go a little coarser this time. In a last desperate effort, I have 2 screws and a washer. Right. Great success! Finally, we jammed the grinder! We found some violence. We found significant damage. Bear in mind, this is still under a microscope, and we're looking at, you can see the size of a kind of cutting tooth here. And so it's quite a small bit of damage, but it looks good, doesn't it? Well, bad, I suppose, if it was yours, which it is. It's mine. The conversation's obviously turned to other grinders here, behind the scenes. A conical grinder will obviously allow more stuff in than a flat burr grinder. And so I guess we're going to have to do this again, just quickly as a replication with a conical burr grinder, something like a niche that has a decent motor on it. Do we just grind the stone? Maybe we need to just try it a bit harder. Going bigger this time. Still not convinced it's going to jam, but it might jam. It's 300 RPM, so it's not like a fast motor, but it's a pretty solid motor in here. It's just grinding the stones. I see no visible damage of any sort on these teeth, none. On the cutting teeth, on the finishing teeth, anywhere, this thing just plowed through stones. As you can tell from the change in knitwear, it's a different day. It's the day of analysis. What we did is we took all of the coffee that we ground and we ran it through our particle size analyzer. We have one here. It basically photographs every particle we feed it, and it gives us all the data about the distribution of particle sizes. It's a pretty good way of objectively saying, has this grinder's ability to grind coffee notably changed? All right, let me show you the chart. So this is control versus stone 5. Along the bottom, the x-axis is size, from the little tiny pieces at very small micron counts up to larger pieces. And then the y-axis is the percentage of total volume that these pieces make up. So you'll see here, there's a little sort of hump around the fine pieces, and then a second, much bigger hump around the sort of coarser pieces. But basically, looking at this chart, looking at the two things overlaid, I see no change whatsoever to the sort of output of these burrs based on having ground some stones. And you can look at total surface area and compare the two, which you can do here. Again, they look very, very, very similar, even though those burrs have been grinding up stones. And actually, you can look at the sort of number of pieces at each size. Obviously, because there's so many tiny pieces, this skews way towards the fines, and so you lose the ability really to see the bigger pieces, confusingly. But again, here, kind of the same. So are we saying that stones don't impact the grinder? Maybe. But before we get into what this actually means for you practically if you find some stuff in your coffee, let's talk about the one thing that we did afterwards that has produced an interesting result, which is grind some metal stuff until the burrs got angry and the grinder jammed. Now we have to leave room for operator error in this. What we would do after opening the burr sets is we would zero them out using a kind of touch point. We'd basically screw them in until they just touched, set that as 0, and then move back a sort of fixed amount for our grind setting. And almost every time, this worked really, really well. It produced an identical particle size afterwards, even though it had been grinding stones. But once we got some metal in there, when we did the same procedure, the grinder began to grind quite differently. That same touch point and then back a fixed amount produced a slightly coarser grind setting than it had done before. And I'll show you that data here. So you see the control, so before it all happened. You'll see after we put some metal through it, which is notably coarser. So you'll see a sort of a peak, and especially in the bigger pieces, further to the right on the chart, so that's further to bigger. And then we adjusted it back a little bit, and even then not quite fine enough maybe. So it sort of sits in between the two. So for some reason, something's sort of changed. Is it the burr set? Is it the damage to the teeth? I'm not sure that could be the case. Have we somehow done some structural damage to the grinder somehow that's changing something about the way the burrs are getting close? I mean, this is a fraction of a millimeter. We're talking about here the difference that's changed. But something has changed. But don't forget, there is room for operator error, which is me. Again, just for comparison, we can look through at the surface area of these and see, is there difference? I don't know if it's grinding differently, anything other than by coarseness. I don't think it's changing the way the burrs are grinding, but it seems to be changing the way the grind is zeroed. Someone smart in the comments, give me an idea. Suggest what I have obviously missed that could have happened here that would cause this, because it's kind of weird. All of this aside, let's kind of answer the most important question, which is, I find something in my bag of coffee, what should I do? Firstly, if you find a stone, let the roaster know. They want to know if they are destoning properly, they may need to tweak and adjust their destoner based on something sneaking through, so they want this as valuable feedback. If you think you've ground a stone though, well, don't freak out. You've probably done no damage to the grinder. However, if you open your grinder up and you see some obvious damage, sort of cosmetic damage to the burrs, I could understand how you could be frustrated. Through no fault of your own, you've had a cosmetic damage to your property. And if somehow buying a bag of beans caused the side of your grinder to get a big scratch along the side, that would also be annoying. It doesn't change its performance, but you would be right to be annoyed. Now, in the past, a lot of roasters have freaked out and I think replaced a lot of burr sets. And I don't know if the cost and waste involved ultimately in doing that is a good thing always. Don't get me wrong, the roaster should absolutely make it right. But I'm not sure if you've ground a stone, you should freak out and demand a new set of burrs, because I'm not sure that it's worth it ultimately. The cost, the investment, all those other things, just the waste, the shipping, the manufacturing, like it just doesn't seem necessary. You should absolutely get some free coffee or some other form of compensation. If a stone has jammed your grinder, then chances are your motor doesn't have enough torque and violence to really damage the burrs ultimately, right? Like at 1400 RPM, we smashed a stone into these burrs, made no difference whatsoever. So stones are weaker than metal. The kinds of stones that are going to make it through a destoner that are found in kind of coffee are clearly not as strong as burrs, as the metal of burrs. If you found a bit of metal or you've ground a bit of metal, then you may be entitled to entirely new burrs. But I would still test them afterwards, and I'd still be surprised if you could taste a difference. Look, clearly it's a different day, judging by the units of knitwear here. The point is, the reason we're back, we felt perhaps a bit blasé, being like, everything's fine. If a stone goes in your grinder, it's fine. Because I read a bunch of stuff on the internet where people claimed the stones genuinely destroyed their grinders. And I was like, oh, maybe we just haven't tested the right grinder. So just quickly, we'll grab a few more grinders of different natures, sizes, price points, and we'll just try again. Because if I am so confident that nothing bad's going to happen, then I should be willing to put some fancy burrs and other grinders and other things to the test to see if I'm indeed correct. Up first is the studio's long-suffering Comandante. We have, of course, the stone for the test. We're going to use this size stones for everything today, so I'm not going to show you them each time, but we're going for like a standard bean-sized stone. Did I just grind a stone? I'm so strong. All right, I'm as surprised as you. I thought there was going to have to be like some sort of manly wrestling with the grinder. Clearly not the case. Up next, everyone's favorite false burr grinder. These will have ceramic burrs inside, completely useless at doing a very good job of grinding coffee. I would say if there is a single burr set I expect to be damaged by a stone, it would be these ones. So it took a little while to get the stone to go and had to set the grind pretty coarse. It was just bouncing around. It wasn't getting drawn into the burrs. And then it went with a kind of puff of smoke. Yep, definitely ground a stone. I mean, they look dusty. I'll give them that. Are they going to do a materially worse job? Is that actually possible? I don't know. I don't really see meaningful damage to them. So we're going to add our stone and, of course, give it a little spray. Because this is an ode 1. We don't want the staticky mess. Now, this is interesting for two reasons. It's got SSP burrs inside it. And also, it doesn't have the strongest motor. This is the most anticlimactic selection of things going on here. I feel like if I was watching this, I wouldn't believe it. I'm just going to throw a stone in live. I feel like a little magic trick. Ta-da.
Is that motor smoke or is this just like
the stone smoke?
the stone smoke?
Did you get some smoke?
Yeah.
While I don't particularly worry about stones in grinders at this point, because through my sheer intense physical power, I hand ground a stone today. I just don't think most grinders will have an issue with them. I think a bunch of grinders won't accept them unless you're grinding really, really quite coarse. The fact that a false burr grinder just kind of powered through it, that this thing, which I've sort of had stall on lighter roasts, powered through the stones, means that for most of the stones you're likely to find in coffee, which are kind of, in my head, kind of patio stones, so to speak, not a huge issue. The kind of pebblier, harder stuff, maybe, possible, but I just don't see them. When I see people's images online of stones in their coffee, I tend to see those kind of patio stone style stones. I really need someone to tell me the right words for these kind of stones. That would be helpful. Anyway, I'm not saying don't worry about it. Nothing bad can ever happen, but I'm saying perhaps we worry about this a bit too much. There's only one sensible way to wrap this whole video up. I must taste the stone. I'm going to grind one more stone and we're going to drink it and see if I can taste it. Let's find out. So I have my bonus stone, weighs 0.9 grams on top of my 15 grams of coffee. Let's see what happens. There it is. You know in those horror movies where they kind of unearth some sort of bacteria? There's nothing can be trapped inside stones, right? Right? Let's taste it. As always, if you want the 1 cup technique, that is linked in the description down below, or up here if you're watching on YouTube in a suitable device. I have myself a little bit of stoneware, shout out NetShack, to do our tasting from. Seems appropriate. Unless someone's going to tell me this isn't stoneware and I don't know my ceramics, in which case, how embarrassing. No, not even a touch of flintiness. No minerality whatsoever. It's just like, it's like nice coffee. I'm sort of disappointed. I'd hoped for a sort of a hint of earth. Yeah, basically you can't taste the stone. I don't think anyone's surprised by that. I think if I sucked a stone, this is getting weird, I would struggle to get much flavour out of it, and actually grinding it down and putting it with a very flavoursome thing like coffee means that you can't taste the stone, which is a shame. All right, that is our exploration into what happens if you get a stone in your coffee and you grind it anyway. And it turns out, not very much. If you get some metal in there, yeah, you should freak out. That, I guess, is the summary of this whole video. But now I want to hear from you down in those comments below. If you've had a stone, you're going to tell me about it, and that's going to skew perception of how frequent they are, but maybe how many times you've had one versus how many bags of coffee you've ever bought. That would be the interesting thing. If you're like 3 stones in 60 bags, that's a lot. If it's 1 stone in like 200 bags of buying coffee, that's maybe less. But I'm still kind of curious what the numbers look like. Let me know your thoughts, ideas, suggestions, feedback, all of that good stuff. But for now, I'll say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.